All right. Good evening, everyone. Glad you are tuned in. A couple of things before we jump into the Bible lesson. I get those countdown videos from a website company called Igniter Media. It's something that we purchased through the church. And sometimes I can't remember if I have used a countdown video or not. There are only so many with questions. When I was watching that one, I actually thought maybe I had used that before. Seems like I remember some of those answers, but don't know if that's true. If I've used it before, shoot me a message in there. I try to write down which ones I use, but again, there's only so many. The other thing about that one, it was kind of funny. I was watching it, and I don't know if you noticed the moving video in the background. The leaf was coming down, and when I first looked at that, I thought I had a bug crawling on my screen. So I was trying to get that bug off my screen, which was not a bug. It was just a leaf in part of the video. So anyway, just a couple of lighthearted things to get us started tonight. Sorry about last week. There were some technical issues that occurred kind of at the last minute. I won't go into detail about all of those, but they weren't really last minute, but the type of technical issue it was, I could not solve it before it was time to live stream. So glad we are back and all of our equipment works well and we are up and running and things are looking good. So again, thanks for joining in. Thanks for being on the live stream tonight. And we've been doing this this series. I don't know if it's really a series. I don't really know what I would call it. That I started, and first lesson, it's really about what is God like. And I don't want to go into a lot of deep things. These are just really some, I don't know, maybe kind of thoughts that I have, and I based it pretty much off Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. I know my microphone boom is in the way there and you can't see that verse, but it's Exodus chapter 3 verse 14. It comes from God's appearance to Moses when he is getting ready to send Moses to deliver the Israelites from captivity. And, you know, God, he goes through the signs and he tells Moses in verse 12, he says, I'll be with you, and this will be the sign that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. And then I think Moses, I think he asked a really, really good question. I mean, sometimes we look at this and think, well, was Moses trying to get out of it? Of course, Moses was trying to get out of it in some way. But this was a really good question. He said, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is who you are to say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. And that's a pretty good question, because if you were going to describe God, or you were going to try to tell somebody what God was like, what kind of things would you say? I mean, some things in life are just really difficult to describe. You know, and I was trying to think of things that I thought were really, really difficult to describe, and I came up with a pretty good list, and I'm not going to share that whole list with you. But, you know, some things in life, sometimes feelings are hard to describe. You know, sometimes there are events in life that sometimes they're very difficult to find either the right words or the right type of words to describe how you feel or how something has impressed you. You know, I was thinking of a couple of sites that Diane and I saw when we were on the Mediterranean cruise. There was one particular sunset that I think it's when we left Pompeii, if I remember correctly. And it was just like, really, really pretty. And Diane was taking a picture of it. And I thought to myself, I think I can just keep that snapshot in my head, and I can still keep it in my head about what that sunset looked like. And I think it was when we left Pompeii. I remember the sunset, just not exactly which port we had just left from. You know, and you just think about things that you've seen or things that you've experienced, and they're just really hard to describe. So if you were going to ask a question, what is God like? I mean, how would you go about describing that? And so as we kind of look at it tonight, and again, this is not going to be, it's going to be a little different than what you normally hear from me. Actually, most of the time that I teach, I will just be teaching a book of the Bible or about a verse of the Bible. A lot of my teaching and preaching is exegetical in that way, and this is a little different. This is more topical, so it's stepping outside my bounds of normalcy just a little bit. But last week, when we 2 weeks ago, because of the mess up with the live stream, we talked just about the mystery of God, how God is somewhat mysterious. He's beyond us, but he's still near to us. And when we think about him being beyond us, tonight I just want to think about power. You know, you think about the things that God has done. You know, when you can, and we'll look at this in a little closer maybe, but when you can speak light into existence, when you can just say, let there be light, or when you have the kind of power that holds everything in existence, like every atom is held together by your power and by your design. But even in the enormity of that power, God uses that power. His desire is to reach down into human hearts. So when the Bible starts with a story like, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, that's much more than, it's much more than a story, right? You know, we talk about the creation story, but at the very heart of that is the design of everything that we see and everything that we experience. And all of that comes from the power of God. And as we kind of journey through this, a part of that is just kind of, why is that? You know, Jeremiah says in Jeremiah chapter 32, verse 17, he says, "Ah, Lord God, you made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm, and nothing is too hard for you." If you look over in Jeremiah, when Jeremiah says that, it's a really interesting thing that's happening in Jeremiah's prophecy. God has prophesied that the Babylonians are going to come destroy Jerusalem and Judah, but he sends Jeremiah out to buy a field. And why would you buy a field in a land that is getting ready to be put into captivity, and you're going to be taken as a captive, deported from the land, and go somewhere else? Why would you go buy a field? And that was part of God's promise, that God was not only going to send the Babylonians as punishment, but he was also going to bring restoration to them when they turned their heart back to him. And that's where, in the buying of that field, is where Jeremiah prays to the Lord and says, I'm reading right here, verse 17, if you can follow along with this. "Ah, sovereign Lord, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm, and nothing is too hard for you." And then later down in verse 26 of that same chapter, that's down here if you want to follow along, "Then the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, I am the Lord, the God of all mankind. Is anything too hard for me? Is anything too hard for me?" Now, you think about the power that we think we have, and we do have it. It's not just that we think it. We possess great power as human beings. I'm just trying to illustrate that the power that we possess is actually, even though it looks pretty magnificent, is pretty minuscule when you compare it to the power of God. You know, we've learned to harness incredible power. I mean, when you can, like that picture, when you can launch a rocket that can break the Earth's gravity and go deep into space or to another planet or go to something like the moon. On the other side of that picture there, I think I've never seen a picture of an atom splitting, but I asked for a picture of an atom splitting, and that's what Google gave me. Now I'm assuming it's right. I don't hold me to that. If it's not right, it's just a bad Google search, okay? But that's supposed to be an atom that's splitting, or an atom. When you can build the kind of cities that we can build. I mean, if you just look at a city at night and all of the lights that are shining in there and the magnificent buildings and the ability that we have to do things like that, I think of things in the medical field. When you can do heart transplants and liver transplants and lung transplants, and you can go in and repair a blood vessel, or you can do brain surgery. I mean, just the incredible amount of power just in the medical field. I mean, when I think of things like x-rays and CAT scans and MRIs and just the capabilities that we have. But I also think that almost every ounce of that power is borrowed. I mean, it's not really ours. It's finite and it's conditional. And when Jeremiah looks at the stars and he says, nothing is too hard for you, that Jeremiah sees in his day and in our day what no empire can manufacture. I mean, creation and our observance of creation and observance of laws, whether they're natural laws or moral laws. I mean, we're talking right now about the natural laws of science that allow us to shoot that rocket into space, or split an atom, or create from that power a machine that can see into our bodies and see what's wrong with us. We didn't really create it. What we're learning to do is to harness the power that's already there. The creation itself is the living proof of the power, because we're just harnessing the power that creation has. So I pulled out this picture of the Milky Way, and to be honest with you, I'd love to be deep enough in space I could just see the Milky Way. I'm assuming that's what the Milky Way looks like, because that's what science tells me it looks like. So I'm going with that, although I've never seen it. I've only seen drawings and sketches and things like this about what the Milky Way would look like. But it's there, and we're here, and there had to be some type of cause that put us here. I mean, the universe exists, I think, for a purpose, for a reason. But if the universe exists, then I think it probably has a cause. And I think that the cause of the universe existing is God. And as we go into that, it's not just about the power that God had to say, let there be light, or the power that would enable him to gather the waters and bring up the ground and create the earth, that makes the galaxy that swirls and forms. It's not just about the theology. It's kind of the why that I want to talk about more than the maybe the how. Okay, so can you think like, if we're here, then we must have had some kind of beginning, right? It's not like, I don't want to debate this or anything. It's not anything like that. I mean, there's this, why is there something rather than nothing? Okay, maybe that's a good way to put it. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why is there just not? It's just emptiness. Why are we here? Why, and again, I'm not trying to be scientific with this, but we see things, we touch things, we measure things, and there had to be a point that they began to exist. Like you see a sunrise and there's a first light, and a heartbeat has a first pulse, and a star, I guess, has a first spark maybe. And the cause is not the matter itself. It had to come from somewhere. It had to to be created from somewhere. So even like if there is a big bang, I mean, something had to go bang right. What is the initial cause of all the things that exist? I don't know if you've ever tried this or not, and I don't really, I don't know if I recommend it or not. I just tell you sometimes how weird my mind is and the way that it works. Sometimes I try to sit and think, well, what if I didn't exist? Like what if, why am I here? And when I start thinking about why I exist and how humanity exists and the world exists, it all seems pretty fragile. And when I want to talk about the power of God, I'm not looking at cause as much as I'm looking at why. I mean, I'm a firm believer in the Bible. It's why do we exist? And it's not about a power or a impersonal explosion of matter. It's about will. It's about the desire to create something. It is about a person. And in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So it doesn't start with an impersonal thing. It starts with a very personal being, God, who created us out of his will and out of his desire. So that's the why. It doesn't lead us just to power, but to a person. They're the uncaused cause, the eternal I am, that I am who I am. It's that Jesus Christ, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So the heavens, the cosmos declares the power of God. It hasn't always been. It's spoken into being by God. By the word of the Lord, the heavens were made. That's what the psalmist wrote. And by the breath of his mouth, all of their host. So the universe exists. We exist because God wills for us to exist. So that voice that spoke light into the world is the same power that fills all of the void and sustains the galaxies. And if God can create all things from nothing, there's not anything in your life that he doesn't have the power to renew. So when Genesis tells us God said, let there be light, and there was light, it's not strain, it's not struggle, it's not speech, it's just power. It's almost power without effort. When God speaks, things that didn't exist now exist. And his power is not chaotic in the sense that he is just throwing power around. It's creative. It has form and purpose. So, like it's every sunrise is kind of an echo of that first command of let there be light. So the big word we use is we say God is omnipotent. I mean, God is all powerful. God has all power. But, sometimes I use this lightning bolt thing. I mean, I don't know if this is a real picture or an AI created picture. I don't know if somebody shot that with a camera. It actually looks like somebody probably shot that picture with a camera. And if they did, I mean, top notch. That is a great, great photograph. I mean, I love that. But one of the ways that the power of God is impressed upon me sometimes is when you see a thunderstorm in the distance and you see the lightning flashing around and you think about the power that's harnessed within that. And it's not just like it's raw force or uncontrolled might when you were talking about the omnipotence of God. And sometimes, you hear things, well, if God's all powerful, can God create a rock that he can't lift? Either he can't create the rock or he can't lift it, but one of the ways he can't do something, right? And that, I don't know all the debating terms. I'm not a debater. It kind of begs the question. It's not that God has the ability to do anything imaginable. It's that God has the ability to do the things that are consistent with his nature. I mean, everything is designed to accord to his will, his wisdom, and his character. I mean, even the text tells us there's some things that God can't do. God can't lie. I mean, text says that pretty clearly. It's not because he's weak, it's because he's holy. He can't sin, he can't contradict himself. God doesn't act in a way that denies his own perfection. I mean, God does things that are consistent with his nature, and that's kind of the good news. Because if you had all of that power and it exists apart from goodness, I'm telling you, that would be really terrifying, because even when you think about the judgment of God is also balanced by the holiness of God. Or if you have unlimited strength, but if you have unlimited strength without holiness, that's kind of chaos. But the power of God is never detached from his moral perfection. Every act of God's power flows through maybe a filter of holiness and love. So his power never violates his character. It just expresses his character. Even when we were reading in Jeremiah, I mean, the punishment that God sent on Judah and Jerusalem, that did not violate his character. It was a reference to his character. You know, when he parts the Red Sea, and the strength and the mercy, he raised Jesus from the tomb. We'll talk about that in a minute. So even in God's power, when he judges, justice flows from the same heart that said, "Let there be light," and created the world at the beginning for his purposes. So we're not, when we're talking about what is God like, he's not like a cosmic tyrant, right? Who can do or does whatever he wishes or wants without restraint. We're describing a perfect, moral, holy being whose will is always right, and whose ways are always pure, and whose strength is always trustworthy. So when the psalmist comes along, he says, "The Lord is righteous in all his ways and kind in all his words." So that's what divine power looks like. In reality, it's strength, but it's strength that's governed by love. So when you see a picture like this, or you're looking at the night sky and you see the lightning split the sky the way that it does, power is not reckless. His power is righteous. And so when we feel weak and when we feel powerless, we have to remember that the same energy, the same power that holds the stars together, that created every cell, that said, "Let there be light," the same God who has all of that power is also the one who holds your life together. So even when you don't understand what's going on, even when you struggle with what's happening, even when you can't make sense of it, that God who has that power is the one who is holding your life together. So it's not just that it's this cosmic power, it's this compassionate power. And God is never, I mean, he's not out of control, and he's never out of reach. And if you wanted to see the greatness of the power, probably, I think the best example of the greatness of the power is the resurrection. You know, the Bible doesn't describe God's power in past tense. It's in present tense. I think there are some things that are very, very hard. I mean, for me, they're very, very hard to explain. The birth of a child, I think that's very, very hard to explain. Not the physical characteristics of the birth of a child, or you know, it's the creation of new life, right? I mean, that's really hard for me to try to explain. You know, I'm not trying to be sad here, but to see someone take their last physical breath, that's something that's very hard for me to explain. But I know that the same power that said, "Let there be light," and the one where Paul wrote in Ephesians about the immeasurable greatness of power toward those who believe, the same power that created life is also the same power that raised Christ from the dead. So I guess what I'm trying to say in some way, and probably not doing a very good job of it, but creation and resurrection are two sides of the same power. You know, one brought light out of darkness, and one brings life out of death. when Jesus is in the tomb, the world probably seemed like it was pretty silent again to the apostles. I mean, darkness had returned, but the same God speaks into the silence and in the void, and he whispers into the grave, and the lifeless body of Jesus, that at the commands of the Creator. So creation obeyed him once in the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and it obeyed him again. And when he restored Jesus, when he raised him from the death, it's not just that he brought breath to physical lungs. He inaugurated this new creation. Paul, I think I got the verse up here. I can show it to you. But Paul in 1 Corinthians 15, really cool. I mean, he says, but Christ has indeed been raised from the dead, the first fruit of those who have fallen asleep. It's that idea of first fruit, the first of its kind. So the power, I think where I'm trying to get to with this is the power of God is not just confined to making a galaxy exist. It's not just that he can form a galaxy and set it out there in space so we can see kind of what it looked like. The power of God is the strength to make humanity holy and righteous and to make sinners stand saved. It's the power to resurrect what sin has destroyed. The universe is created with a word, and salvation is initiated at a cross. So the same so Jesus, being God in the flesh, the same hand that stretched out the heavens was nailed on the cross for you. So by him, 1 John chapter 1, all things were created. So creation shows us what God can do, and the cross really kind of shows us what God chooses to do. So the power that we're talking about is that redemptive power, that redemptive power that heals humanity. And so you get a picture like this. I don't know who drew this picture either. I looked, I couldn't find it. But it's not divine because it's not hidden. It's infinite, and it's visible. And the power that holds the world in his hand it's intentional power. And I really looked for a picture where the world was much, much smaller in the hand of God, because it's like the hand of God could hold the world just on the very tip of the finger, right? He upholds the universe, every atom, every orbit, every breath. I mean, every breath you take is sustained by the one who created the world in the beginning. The God who said, "Let there be light," and spoke creation into existence, died on the cross for you and holds creation together. And so when you see galaxies spin, and we talk in science about momentum and all those kind of things, and those are all scientific terms, from my point of view, they're spinning on mercy, because God allows it to happen. The sun doesn't rise by habit. It's not like, it's just a cycle and habitually it happens that way every time. Yes, it does happen that every time, but it's because of command. It is God. God never stopped speaking into his world, because if he did, the world would just unravel. So the voice of God vibrates through every fabric of our existence. And to me, that's what omnipotence, the power of God, looks like. It's not just the power to start, it's the power to sustain something. Now, here's where the little switch is, right? If God has the power that he can sustain the universe, sustain the galaxies, even farther than we could possibly see, that is the same God who chooses to uphold you by his word. Like when your strength fails and when you fail, he doesn't. When your world is just shaking apart because of whatever's happening in your life, his doesn't. When you ask, how am I still standing? You're standing because the one who powers everything is holding you up. It's not just out there in stars and planets and skies and things that we marvel at and lightning strikes that come out of a storm cloud. His power resides by his spirit, it's within you. And that same power, it transforms us. It's directed, and it's not detached from us. It's the kind of stuff that, when we really struggle to forgive, he can help us forgive. It's full of volume and purpose. So you see that in John chapter 13, right? You think Jesus comes to earth. He created everything by his word. Everything exists because of him. You think with that amount of power and the power that Jesus possessed, he would come into the world and his message would be, everybody just do what I say. I mean, just think what you would be like if you had unrestricted, complete, total, unchallenged power. What would you try to possess? What would you try to do? Jesus in John comes not to dominate in that way because of power, but he comes to serve. And so then we see him washing the disciples' feet. And that's where we get this glimpse that the power of God is not just in what God does. It's the paradox of divine power. The one with authority will kneel and serve. The creator will take the posture of a servant. The hands that shaped galaxies was washing human feet. And it's not weakness. It's love. So the all-encompassing, all-powerful God finds the truest expression not in conquest, but in compassion. So power when it serves. And you see Jesus do that. He heals the sick. He calms the storms. He forgives sins. It's immeasurable power, but it's under control. So that's Jesus taking the outer garment, wrapping a towel around his waist, and he starts serving, and he says, this is your example, because that's what power does. So in him, all things hold together. He keeps it. So creation and the power of God, creation's not a single event. It's this ongoing reality. The world doesn't exist because God made it once. The world exists because he keeps it and he sustains it and he protects it. And it's not, again, this isn't supposed to be about science. It's a lot more than doctrine. It's about comfort. It's about understanding how God chooses to love us. So when the world feels chaotic, when our life feels fragile, when pieces don't really seem to fit together anymore, this is God's truth. I will hold you by my power all the way into death. So even the thing when we look at creation that seems to be the finality of all things, which is death, even that is not finality, because the God who sustains us is greater than death, and the God who sustains us is more powerful than a universe that we live in, because he spoke it into existence. So you are being cared by mercy. So what I think I would ask you to do is, like every sunrise, you just say, you know what, that's God saying he's still there. He's still faithful. He's still holding us. Every spin when we're spinning off the planet, it is God commanding gravity to stop and to hear our prayer. The one who holds the universe into the span of his hand. Just think about that. He holds the universe in his hand, but then think of a father when he reaches up and he cups his child's face in like compassion and care. So the same God that sustains the universe is the same God that's holding your face. So the all power nature of God, the glory of that is in the fact that it is so intimate. and how it sustains and protects and holds us. So maybe this week, just kind of stop and think about how God sustains you and what He's done. Again, that's a little kind of a different Bible study than what I normally do, but it's going to be that way for a couple of weeks. So just kind of hang on, and maybe you'll find something good in there somewhere. Sunday morning on Bible class, I didn't put a slide on this. We're going to be talking about Thanksgiving. We're going to talk about Thanksgiving leading into Thanksgiving. So 4 or 5 weeks on Sunday morning, we're going to be talking about that. Sermon Sunday, Jesus and Haggai. Set your heart on your ways. Really excited about that sermon. We'll live stream that at 10, Bible class at 9. We've got Trail of Treats this weekend. If you live in our area, I don't know if you can see that. Trail of Treats, you can't read that text down there, but Saturday 6 to 8, come take a walk through the woods, get some candy. Not sure about the bonfire. I think we can probably get a burn permit. Not sure about that, and we've got to work on that a little bit. But please join us for that. So thanks for joining in. I don't really see any comments anywhere. Didn't get any messages through the text. So I hope you have a great evening, and I will see you next week.